Hey, long time no see. It's me, David Torque, and welcome back to the Torque Force YouTube channel. It's been a while since the last video I uploaded, too long in fact, and a lot's happened since the last video. I'd be willing to bet that some of you are watching this and trying to even remember why you subscribed to this channel. It was probably because you're a Nintendo fan like me. My buddies and I started this channel because we thought it'd be fun to share things we're passionate about with the world. Whether talking about my addiction to the Legend of Zelda series, adventuring through the world of Pokemon, or sharing other video game experiences with you all, this channel has always been a fun outlet for me and my friends. As we enter new chapters of our lives, our priorities shift and we tend to get busier. Over the course of this year, I found myself with less time to sit down, script, record, and edit videos, hence the lack of videos being uploaded on this channel. There have been so many ideas flowing through my head though, and so many unique experiences that I've had this year that I want to talk about. As such, this upcoming year I'm trying to be more intentional, trying to take more time to be creative and upload to this channel. I've got a hodgepodge of different videos that I'd like to make, but as we reach the end of the year, one particular topic has been at the forefront of my mind, and that topic is about achieving goals. Now, you're probably wondering what achieving your goals has to do with this channel that's focused on Nintendo. And before you lose interest, just give me a minute or two to explain. Like I mentioned, as we enter new chapters of our lives, we tend to get busy and have less time to put towards things we enjoy. Whether video games, music, sports, etc., we tend to neglect things like our hobbies and focus on our priorities, rightfully so. For me, and probably most of you, video games are a hobby and a fun way to pass the time. What that means though is that video games are often pushed to the side when we get busy. Ultimately, that's probably for the best, but sometimes I know that I need that escape. About a year ago, my wife and I were entering a new chapter of our lives, and I was beginning to realize that I'd have less time for video games, the Torque Force YouTube channel, and a couple other hobbies that I really enjoy. One night, we happened to be discussing New Year's resolutions. I've never really liked those, and maybe that's because I could never really follow through on mine. I think that's the case for most people though. We tend to set unrealistic goals without actually thinking about how we'll achieve them. Saying we're gonna work out every day or lose 50 pounds or ultimately anything that requires considerable commitment is tough to achieve without a clear and calculated strategy. As I was talking with my wife, I decided, rather than set one big New Year's resolution, I would set a series of smaller goals with the intention of hitting at least one of them. I knew life would be getting busier, so I decided I was going to set some goals that aligned with my hobbies in hopes that it would help me be more deliberate with my time. So, what were my goals this year? Well, here's a picture of those goals on a little magnetic whiteboard that we have on our fridge. As you can see, there are several. In no particular order, I set the following goals. Study Japanese for 30 minutes a day, read 5 new books, play 5 new games, do a core workout every single day, run at least 5 miles a week, lift 3 times a week, reduce my portion size by 1/4. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't hit all of these goals. I did not study Japanese for 30 minutes a day, read 5 new books, or do a core workout every single day. I understand not hitting the reading goal. I'm just not a huge reader, although I probably need to be better at that. What I think is interesting though is that the Japanese and core workout goals that required everyday action just didn't stick. I think that speaks to the importance of realistic goal setting, and like I mentioned, anything requiring everyday action is really tough to achieve. Despite those failures, that's not what this video is about though. This video is about achieving goals, and there were several that I did achieve. Those were playing 5 new video games, running at least 5 miles a week, lifting 3 times a week, and reducing my portion size by 1/4. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about my goals for running, lifting, or eating less because that's not really why you all are here. What I will say is that I achieved these goals by aligning them with my hobbies and making them as realistic as possible. One big hobby of mine is soccer. I love the sport, and I've played it my entire life. I knew I tended to run at least 3 miles per soccer game that I played in, so that would mean that if I played soccer 2 times a week, I'd easily hit my goal of running at least 5 miles a week. Now, there were exceptions. There were a couple instances when I was out of town, sick, injured, or the weather just didn't permit getting out and playing soccer. But aside from those rare instances, I did manage to get out and play soccer multiple times a week, allowing me to hit my running goal. I'd also recently begun lifting with some friends of mine, and oftentimes we held each other accountable to lift each week. Setting intentional time to lift with my friends helped me establish a consistent routine for lifting, so I managed to hit that goal too. Lastly, I hit my eating goal by aligning that with cooking, another hobby that I enjoy. I figured out foods and recipes that I liked and developed a repertoire of low-carb, high-protein recipes that I could whip up pretty quickly. Between running, lifting, and eating, I managed to hit 3 of my smaller goals. And those 3 goals actually yielded some pretty significant results. This year, I managed to lose 40 pounds, and I think that just goes to show the value of setting achievable goals. Little steps go a long way. But enough about that. That's not why you all are here. This is a video game channel after all, so it's time that I get back on topic. What does any of this have to do with video games? Well, if you remember, another one of my goals for the year 2024 was to play 5 new games. When I say new, I mean new to me. Whether retro or modern, I wanted to take the time to be intentional and play 5 games that I hadn't played before. I've got a pretty large backlog, so I decided to focus on mainly playing games that I already owned. I also decided that the best way to gain momentum was to start with a series that I knew I enjoyed, Pokemon. So to start out the year, I whipped out my $30 Nintendo Switch and started a fun-filled, nostalgia-brimming adventure through the Kanto region in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. And real quick, you heard that right. I managed to get my hands on a Nintendo Switch for just $30, and you can find out how in the video that I made about it on our YouTube channel. Check the link in the description. Okay, self-promo over. Back to the goal. Now, this video isn't going to include in-depth reviews of each game that I played, but I'll talk a little bit about each one and share my experience. So, I decided to kick off the new year with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. Honestly, I've always wanted to play this game, but it was hard to motivate myself to pick it up. Like many people, I haven't been as impressed with many of the more recent Pokemon games. In my opinion, they felt rushed and ultimately provided a lackluster experience that left me feeling more disappointed than excited about the Pokemon series. Thankfully, I couldn't heap more praise on Let's Go Pikachu. I won't spend a ton of time on the game, but what I'll share is that it felt complete, polished, and unique. It felt familiar, but at the same time different. The Pokemon team managed to integrate the Pokemon Go catching mechanic into the game in a really fun way that felt refreshing rather than gimmicky. I think I prefer the random encounters in battling wild Pokemon, but for someone who isn't as familiar with the Pokemon series, I think that the Let's Go games might be the perfect start. Likewise, I think that Let's Go Pikachu might have been the perfect start to my New Year's goal, as I managed to beat it within the first month of the year. I now had a ton of momentum, and honestly, after venturing through the Kanto region with Pikachu, I was itching for more Pokemon. So I whipped out my Game Boy Advance and set off into the Hoenn region in Pokemon Ruby. If you've been around the channel for a bit, you might know that we streamed a Pokemon Emerald Nuzlocke. I also played quite a bit of Ruby when I was younger, but I never beat it. Before you go and say that Ruby isn't really a new game since I've already played a Gen 3 Hoenn game, let me say that I might actually tend to agree with you. The thing is though, I still never beat it. I remember spending hours and hours trying to catch Groudon, only to fail over and over again. Ultimately, I think I ended up giving up on Ruby when I managed to get my hands on a Nintendo DS and Pokemon Diamond. The allure of the backlit screens and the brand new Sinnoh region was just too exciting, and my original journey through the Hoenn games came to an end. Well, it was time to return to Hoenn and claim what was rightfully mine, Groudon and the Hoenn League Championship. So I set off into the Hoenn region once again, just like when I was little. Only this time, I made right by my childhood self. I finally caught the ever-elusive Groudon and assembled an elite team capable of taking down the Elite Four and the Hoenn League champion, Steven Stone. And with that, I beat my second game of the year, and it was just under 2 months into 2024. It was around that time that my buddies and I began streaming a new game on the channel, a cult classic, Pokemon Colosseum. And yes, I am about to talk about another Pokemon game. Are you beginning to notice a theme? So, Pokemon Colosseum came out on the GameCube alongside the Generation 3 Game Boy Advance games. It features an incredibly unique story, and it was the Pokemon series' first real soiree into three-dimensional Pokemon adventures. It's always fun beating a new Pokemon adventure for the first time, but this one was one that I got to experience with my friends since we streamed it on our channel. I'll spare you the details, but if you'd like to watch our playthrough of the game, we have it all in a playlist on our channel. Feel free to check it out in the link below. I'm gonna be honest here. Pokemon Colosseum wasn't the most technically impressive game, but I kind of expected that since it came out in the early 2000s. Ultimately, Colosseum was Pokemon's experiment with the 3D world, and I think that it has so much more personality than many of the 3D Pokemon games that we get nowadays. It has such an early 2000s aura, if you know what I mean. The double battle system, Shadow Pokemon, and entertaining mix of characters and designs made this game so much fun. I'm super glad that I was able to play this game with my friends, as well as check off another new game on my list. Since I was streaming Colosseum with Arcarius and Brodavia on our channel, I did have another game that I played on my own, and you'll never guess what series it was from. Okay, for those of you who are getting tired of hearing me talk about Pokemon, I promise I played other games this year, so bear with me. Having just played Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Colosseum, for some reason, I decided to play through Sapphire. Why? Don't ask. I just couldn't stop playing Generation 3 games for some reason. Now, before you give me crap and say that Sapphire definitely isn't a new game since I already played Ruby, hear me out. Sapphire is a different version, with variations in the story, Pokemon, and Legendary. I'd never played it, and one personal goal that I have outside of the New Year's resolution is to eventually play every version of each generation in the Pokemon series. Besides, when it comes to achieving goals, it's important to have a strategy and take measured steps toward achieving the goal. I knew I'd like playing Sapphire, so it was an easy one to add to the list of games that I play this year. Really, I don't have a ton to say about Sapphire. I enjoyed it just as much as I did Ruby. If you've played Pokemon games for a while, then you've probably got several Pokemon you prefer over others. And I feel like oftentimes we go into these games knowing what Pokemon we're going to use before we even get into the game. We know the starter we're going to choose, the flying type, grass type, psychic type, HM Pokemon, etc. That's something I'm trying to get away from with Pokemon games nowadays. This year, I decided I was going to try to add Pokemon to my team that I hadn't used before. In Ruby, I used Exploud, Shiftry, Pelipper, and Sceptile, all Pokemon that I hadn't used before. In Sapphire, I used Grumpig, Cradily, Camerupt, and Slaking. These were all Pokemon I had never brought along with me for a Pokemon adventure. Sure, I still had some of my quote staple Pokemon like Swampert and Flygon in Ruby, and Manectric and Altaria in Sapphire, but adding so many Pokemon that I was unfamiliar with gave both Ruby and Sapphire a breath of fresh air. I could learn and grow with my Pokemon, not knowing what to expect, what moves to teach them, or how effective they'd be for me in the long run. Despite the fact that I played two very similar games around the same time, each of them felt totally different and fun in their own way. And so with that, I was now 4 games into my 5-game goal. It was around April, meaning that I was moving at a pace of about 1 game per month. I was already so close to hitting my goal, and I wasn't even halfway through the year. Honestly, I didn't think reaching my goal was going to be this easy, but with the momentum I gained from all those Pokemon games, I was moving at a breakneck pace. Now, I know I've been glazing the Pokemon series for the entirety of this video, but like I said, I did play other games this year, and after playing so much Pokemon, I decided it was time to branch out. I had just modded one of my Nintendo 64 controllers to use for Nintendo Switch Online, and I was itching for some N64. When it comes to the N64, I usually gravitate to Smash Bros, Mario Kart, and the Zeldas, but in the spirit of my New Year's resolution, I decided to try something new, Star Fox 64. Despite briefly maining Fox in Smash Bros, I had never actually gotten into the Star Fox series. I heard it was fun though, so I decided, what the heck, let's try it. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't actually beat Star Fox 64. That said, what I did experience with it, I really enjoyed. It had been a while since I played the N64, and playing Star Fox 64 transported me back 20-something years to simpler times when my only responsibility was making sure that my Game Boy didn't run out of AA batteries. It was a refreshing feeling, and it was accompanied by a solid game. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the Star Fox series, so I'm not really sure how Star Fox 64 stacks up compared to the other titles. I just know I really enjoyed flying through space, dodging meteorites, barrel rolling out of enemy fire, and taking down Wolf alongside my crew. I'd definitely recommend giving Star Fox 64 a try if you haven't played it before. And just like that, with Star Fox 64, I hit my goal. Only a third of the way through the year, and I had managed to do the unthinkable: successfully achieve a New Year's resolution. I had managed to play 5 new games this year. Sure, a bunch of those were Pokemon games, and ultimately they all play very similarly, but I think that presents some good insight when it comes to achieving goals. It's so tough to establish consistency and maintain forward momentum as you work towards your goal, so it's important to have a strategy that supports hitting that goal. By starting out with the Pokemon games, I got into the habit of setting time aside to play games. I became much more deliberate with my time, and it was so much easier since I was playing a series I really enjoyed. After my first or second game of the year, I had established a good routine, and I was flying through games left and right. Now, I highlighted the first 5 games that I played this year since I had set aside the goal to play 5 games. But being only a third of the way through the year, I had plenty of time to play even more games. Having achieved my goal and established a good routine, I kept flying through games. All in all, I managed to play 13 games that I hadn't played before. Outside of the 5 that I spoke about already, these are the other games that I played this year: Pokemon Fire Red, Pokemon Stadium, Dr. Mario, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Pokemon X, Pokemon Heart Gold, and Pokemon Blue. But that's not all. Those were just the games that I hadn't played before. I also found time to go back and play games that I had played previously, as well as games with friends. Some of the other games that I got to play this year were Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, Pokemon Soul Silver, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Smash Bros. 64, Wii Fit, and FIFA 18, specifically the Manager mode. I played way more video games than I thought I would this year. Despite entering a new chapter of life and being busier than I ever had been, I managed to find time for a hobby that I really enjoy. On top of that, I found time for my other hobbies like playing soccer and hanging out with friends. This year, I set a series of New Year's resolutions, and while I didn't achieve all of them, I'm beyond satisfied with the resolutions that I did manage to achieve. Even though I didn't study Japanese for 30 minutes a day, read 5 new books, or do a core workout every day, I did manage to run at least 5 miles a week, lifted 3 times a week, improved my eating habits considerably, and of course, played well over 5 new video games this year. I don't mean for any of this to come across like I'm bragging about accomplishments or anything. Ultimately, I've just said that I played a bunch of video games this year and worked out a bit more. I'm sure that's just a normal day for many of you. What I mean to highlight though is how I managed to find time for my hobbies by aligning them with my goals. I knew I wanted to run more, so I got back into the habit of playing pickup soccer. I knew I wanted to lift more consistently, so I aligned my workouts with my friends. I knew I wanted to try new video games, and so I deliberately set aside time to play games. I became much more intentional with my time, and doing that allowed me to manage my priorities while still making time for my hobbies. It wasn't easy at first though. It's tough to establish routines. Typically, it takes about 2 weeks of consistency to build a habit. In the same vein, it takes only 2 days of inconsistency to break that same habit. That's why I started with the Pokemon series. I knew if I started with a series I enjoyed, then I'd actually want to sit down, play games, and develop that habit. I set myself up for success, and that's really the key when it comes to achieving goals, taking measured, strategic steps towards your goals until you get there. So now, as we reach the end of this year and move into next year, I'm reflecting and asking myself, what are my goals for next year? Well, I think I'll take this year's goals and make some slight adjustments. I don't want to completely stray away from the good habits that I established this year, so my goals for next year are the following. Read 5 new books. I read 2 books last year, and I know that I can do 5 with more intentionality. Heck, I could probably even do more, but we're not going to go down that road. Run at least 5 miles a week. I'm keeping this goal the same since it aligns really well with my soccer hobby. I don't want to lose that. Lift 3 times a week. Similar to the running goal, I'm keeping this goal the same since I really think I've got a good routine and I want to maintain that. Bench press my body weight. Being fairly new to lifting, I've focused much more on form and learning different exercises. Next year, I'd like to push myself a bit more, and bench pressing my body weight seems like a measured goal that I think that I can achieve. Play 5 new games. Just like my goal from this past year, I want to play 5 video games that I haven't played before. I know that I can achieve this one, and I enjoyed it so much this year that I had to do it again. Play 1 game from each Pokemon generation. Okay, this may be the toughest goal to achieve given there are 9 generations with Gen 10 just around the corner, but with the right approach, I think I can do it. This past year, I really got back into the series, and I think it's time I give the newer generations a fair chance. And last but not least, spend 2 to 3 hours a week on the TorqueForce YouTube channel. Earlier this year, this channel was going strong. We put out a few videos and even hit our 1,000 subscriber goal. Thank you all so much for your support. As I got busy though, less time went into the channel, so I want to try to be more intentional and consistent with it next year, even if that's just for a couple hours each week. So those are my goals for next year. What do you think about them? Do you think they're realistic and achievable? I know I've talked about my goals for a bit, but I'm really curious about yours. What goals did you set this past year, and did you achieve them? Were they related to video games, or were they outside of video games? What are your goals for next year? Do you agree or disagree with my strategies for setting and achieving goals? Let me know in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more on the channel, it would really mean a lot if you liked the video or subscribe to the channel. Regardless of that though, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and I hope that you're able to achieve all of your goals for next year. Thanks so much again, and I'll see you again soon on the TorqueForce YouTube channel. And now, without further ado, goodbye.
Hear me scream, I'm here to break your stream. Hog, hear me scream, I'm here to break your stream.